I have an extraordinary guest today. He is Nicholas Riemer. He is the overall winner of the Psychos Top 35 Under 35 CA competition, but he's also a very innovative entrepreneur. He is the founder of the Invigilator app, and the app has already made a big difference in overcoming the education challenges our country faces in a post-COVID world.
Hi, Nick. Welcome to the Mentor Piece. I am so grateful and so privileged to have you on my channel. As you know, the Mentor
Thanks so
Piece.
much.
Perfect. As you know, the Mentor Piece is all about giving pieces of advice to help someone else's life. And since you come from such an esteemed background, but before we get into it, I want to know, what book are you currently reading?
So the last few weeks we've been in the middle of our mid-year exams. I must say I'm a little bit behind on all of my reading, but the one book that I am halfway through, so I'm looking forward to finish it, is Full Night's Shoe Dog. So basically the story about Nike. And I think what really got my attention, obviously it's a massive business. And obviously it focuses on how he built the business from scratch and scaled the business. But right on the front, you'll see that there's a quote from Warren Buffett saying, "The best book I read last year, Phil is a gifted storyteller." So as soon as you got a quote from Warren Buffett, it obviously strikes my interest. My previous life before the Invigilator, I headed up one of the investment education teams at
Oh
FNB.
my word, wow.
So anything that Warren Buffett wrote, anything that he said, I follow and I read avidly. So you're hearing a quote like that or seeing a quote like that on the front cover, obviously, sort of sparked my interest. And I must say it's been fantastic. And I think one of the interesting bits that sort of I saw straight away at the beginning of the book here, I'm going to quickly just read
please share. I'm like such a nerd, so like tell me information.
So one of the paragraphs here sits on page 41 of the book for anyone that wants to look into it. It says, "After getting my 9 hours, I worked at an accounting firm, Lybrand, Ross and Montgomery." So straight away, Phil Knight is an accountant. So that was his first job. So, I mean, very interesting for us chartered accountants to obviously follow the story. And he goes on into the book here on working at one of the smaller firms to start off with. And then eventually started working for PricewaterhouseCoopers and some of the bigger firms. But very interesting to just read his sort of background into, he studied accounting, started off in an accounting firm.
Oh, wow.
And because of his passion for running, just looked at a clever way of bringing in sort of cheap running shoes into the States from Japan. And that's really where it started. But I think, for all of us entrepreneurs that have got our accounting backgrounds, I mean, that's where the dream started for him. And I mean, look what he's built today. So for me, that was obviously something that I thought was worth sharing. Is that Phil Knight is actually a qualified accountant.
It's quite inspiring, especially when I think of your story and how you didn't just, if I can remember, you didn't just start off wanting to study BCom accounting. And then you did first year, you became an academic article clerk instead of going straight into first year. Could you give us a brief rundown of your route and how you started? And then before going into articles, you said, no, I'm going to do some academic articles. And just to get into academic articles is also no joke. You also have to have some good marks. So please explain to us the requirements as well as your route and how you started and how you became a CA.
Perfect. So I was quite a sportsman when I like to think of myself as one when I was growing up. So I really enjoyed cricket. I really enjoyed playing golf, and really that meant choosing the University of Stellenbosch to go and study my first degree. And initially I was down to go and study Bachelor of Accounts and the CA stream from the start. Speaking to my cricket coaches and some of my other peers down there, they said that it might be a bit hectic studying the CA route while playing cricket, because it's quite hectic when you play multi-sport. There's probably training 3 or 4 times a week. A lot of it is during lectures, before lectures, after lectures.
How did you balance everything?
Exactly. So then when I saw all of that and the cricket schedule, I thought, no. So I didn't do the CA route straight away. I actually did BCom finance down at Stellenbosch. So a lot of cricket, and then obviously the BCom finance undergrad.
Yes.
And I loved it. It was definitely a good choice for me, because I think at that point in time, to try and balance everything and then get your CA, I don't think it would have been right for me. And I think I needed to mature.
Yeah.
I was one of those CAs that needed to mature first. I needed to see the world a bit before I could really commit to what was needed. So I enjoyed the finance aspect and getting a degree in finance. And I think that was, it's definitely sort of started my passion for finance. But when I came back to Joburg and got a job, I started working at Hollard and managed to get into the mergers and acquisitions team after about working about 12 months' time. And that was really what opened my eyes up to, valuations and different investments and private equity deals. And
yes.
My boss at the time, both of my bosses were chartered accountants at the time. And I think I quickly realized that without your CA, it was going to be very difficult to either head up one of these divisions one day, or to run one of the businesses that would essentially have a big company like a Hollard wanting to invest in you. So that was my light bulb moment and my decision to say, no, I now need to get my chartered accountant. So while working, I did the conversion.
But sorry for interrupting. Did you have a discussion, or did you just see from your bosses the opportunities that CA could bring you? Or what was it a discussion? Was it just a thought? Because I mean, when I think of you and your book, and you love Warren Buffett and you studying that field, and then something clicked, CA as well.
So my dad's a CA. So obviously he was instrumental in me sort of growing up and my business experience, investment experience, and I always, and still do obviously look up to my dad as one of my mentors. And I think, looking at his career and everything he was able to achieve with the CA, he's one of those proud CA holders where, for him, CA opened up so many doors, from a business opportunity point of view. So I think that was definitely one of them, in terms of the light bulb moments. And then two, it was, more than just seeing the fact that your bosses have got those qualifications. It's just seeing the knowledge that they have, not just the qualification, the knowledge. I think,
yes,
for us, you sometimes, when you go through the CA journey, especially those that go straight out of, first year, straight out of school, straight into the CA stream, you qualify and you're just the CA. But if you go into the business world before having your CA, I think you don't take for granted that financial foundation that the CA qualification gives you. And I mean, you look up to when I was young, like that, without my CA and without the whole experience of what we go through, just the conversations that you can hold, the thorough understanding you have of business, the ability to...
I couldn't agree more.
That was it for me. More than just to say, I need this as an accolade because it was the actual core understanding. Because I think with that CA/SA qualification, it really is that financial foundation into anything in life, in business.
Oh yes, tax, MANAC, besides auditing, just those other fields.
And being an entrepreneur, because I think, if you look at trying to compete in anything in the world at the moment, if you want to be a top golfer, you need the top equipment. If you want to be the top cricketer, you need the top coaching and the top equipment and the best. So if you want to go and compete in the business world, why not have the best qualification? So for me, that was it.
I love that. Yes.
Because if you're then one step ahead of the competition because you've got a thorough understanding of the engine of your business, it's really going to hold you in good stead then going forward, because you're always going to have a grasp of the numbers. You're always going to have a grasp of the budgets and the cash flow. And you can have businesses that are doing very well from a sales point of view, but if you don't have your finger on the cash flow of the business, you can bankrupt the business before you get going. So
correct. Especially if you don't have I don't want to say a good CA in place in a business, just to understand those numbers. There's no point. You're seeing all this growth and then you're squandering the cash because you don't actually know how to use it appropriately. So I couldn't agree.
Absolutely. So Yeah, so that was the thinking, and I suppose the plan, and then I had to go and
Yeah.
execute, right? Because that all looked very good on paper, but now you actually had to go and because I didn't do the BAC undergrad, I had to do the
Yes.
conversion here. So you do the 3 years conversion into BAC in 1 year, so quite a tough year. So I did that while working. So I remember, I
Did you
remember
have a life?
some very
Did you
no,
did you
at
even
that
did you
point,
even
no.
play cricket
I
at all
remember
that
some
year?
very early mornings. No. When I got back from Stellenbosch, that was my cricket days done. Then
Okay.
it was focused on to work in my CA and then business. Yeah, so I had my fun and I played my sport while I was at Stellenbosch in school. And then when it was time to commit to the CA, then that became my life, I suppose. Then when you go for it, you've got to commit, as we all know,
Yes, correct.
100%. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So yeah, some very early mornings. I remember some very late nights, and then working, the normal 8 to 6, and then waking up, I suppose, at about 3, 4 a.m. to get my
Wait a
stars in.
minute. Stop the bus. So you did a conversion exam 3 years into 1 year, and you were working and studying.
So I had to pay for it. So I had to keep working. It was my decision. So so I got my 1 degree paid for at Stellenbosch from my parents, which was fantastic. And then the decision to do the CA was my choice. And then I was on my own. So yeah, I had to keep working so that I could pay for my tuition fees. Yeah.
How did you even discipline? Please, just like a little small breakdown. How did you even discipline your time? Because I'm sure there's so many people out there that are trying to work and study. And I mean, you are doing the most, you're literally converting 3 years into 1 year to get your CA. The goal was there. But like just your time, I can't even understand the workload because you're also in quite a complex environment at work. It's not exactly easy with investments and all of that. Please just, even if it's just a brief summary of how you did it to motivate others, that it can be done.
Yeah, no, it definitely can be done. It's you've got to be very disciplined, as you said. So I mean, I think for me, what I did is I worked very well early morning. So sort of 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, I used to wake up and get sort of 2.5 hours in a day. And you just set that sort of tone from the beginning of the year and just sort of drill that discipline into your daily routine. The best part about it for me is that obviously I was working within an M&A team where a lot of the material that I was studying was now being applied practically.
Oh, wow.
And I had,
so that was
I had chartered accountants there. Yeah, and I had chartered accountants there, in my team that I could bounce things off and see how it was working. And I think that was really where you've got a thorough understanding, for example, of valuations. Anyone that's seen me lecture and at UJ knows that I love valuations because that was my job for a while. And when I paired it with, the understanding that we provided with from the CA curriculum, then it really just clicked for me because then I knew the theory very well, and then I was able to see it from a practical point of view.
Yes.
Before doing my CTA, and I think that was that obviously I just made it my life. But I mean, a lot of it, I remember I had a relationship at the time that unfortunately, didn't make it through that year.
Oh, no.
It's one of those things where if you really want to do it, and that's your goal, then you've got to put that first ahead of everything else. And I was prepared to do that.
Oh, sure. Are you with it now after some time?
I'm not. I'm with my girlfriend Sine, and we've been dating for 4 years. And she's also a chartered accountant, and I met her at the university. Yeah, we actually met at UJ. So I think if I didn't decide to take this path, who would knows where I would have been today. The invigilator certainly wouldn't be here because that was all inspired by UJ and working with Ewald and Yuri at UJ, and I certainly wouldn't be dating Sim because we wouldn't have met. So it's one of those things where you have all these different forks, I suppose, in life, and you make these decisions. And yeah, I think as long as you commit 100%, and once you've made the decision, you give it everything. They tend to work out.
It does. And then to end up at academic articles, was it because of Sunay?
No, so after my conversion year, I went to, I obviously was in at UJ to do my CTA.
Okay.
So I then left, obviously had to leave the corporate world then to do CTA, because at UJ, obviously the lectures are during the day.
Yes.
They typically end at 1 or 2 p.m. So the work day for me then was, it was a non-starter. So for CTA, I made that my full-time job. So there wasn't any work or anything taking place there. I was focused.
You're fully committed to do it full-time, do it once, get it done.
And I think, because I'd come from a space, I suppose, that had seen a lot of the CTA curriculum already in practice, auditing made a huge amount of sense to me, because one of my job roles was dealing with the auditors that were auditing our division. So everything in terms of preparing the audit packs for the external auditors to come in, that was my role. Preparing the valuation templates and evaluating companies is typically down to a junior transactor. So again, that was my role. So when it came to CTA, all of that theory I'd already had practical exposure to. So it meant that I could really own it and do well in it. And I think
and connect the dots, basically, especially with auditing, because sometimes it's so abstract. It's so hard to visualize controls in a test if you haven't experienced the whole process.
Absolutely. I mean, I think when I did my undergrad and at Stellenbosch, we still had an element of auditing. It wasn't the CTA stream auditing. And I mean, if you look at the sort of the different mindset, that was the mindset of almost parrot-fashing, memorizing the different controls and procedures, and then you kind of, just go through it, versus, when I did my CTA, really understanding the audit process and procedures that needed to be followed. And then you just practically applying what you learned in terms of the theory. And that's when you start to get the 70s, 80s, 90%, for your tests and examinations, and it really starts to do well once you can practically apply the theory. But in order to practically apply the theory, you really need to understand the work. And it's sometimes a longer route. To memorize something is, probably going to take you a few hours to do. And if they ask you that and you regurgitate it, well, it can work. But if they throw a bit of a curveball in, then
that's the thing as well.
So well. To sit and practically understand something is always going to take you a little bit longer. But once you get the principle, you can always apply it, no matter what the scenario in the examinations and tests. And that's really when you start to do very well. And I think I was fortunate that happened to me in CTA, and Deerwald and Lindsay at the time, who were working obviously and lecturing in CTA finance, fortunately saw that. And gave me an opportunity, I suppose, to come and work with them in CTA finance for a year in academic articles. And one of the best experiences and best choices I've ever made.
Oh man. And the requirements to actually do academic articles. So if there are guys that are in university and they see you now and you're like, if Nick can do it, I can do it. But how do I get there? What are the requirements to become an academic article clerk before? And then presumably you then go to do your second year at an audit firm. Is that how it works?
Yes. So typically you have to be a good, I suppose, academic achiever.
What is good? Because you were mentioning 80s, 90s. So what is good?
Oh, no, for some tests. Yeah, I think if I look back on my year in terms of the trainees that were selected, it's typically those that are, let's say, top 15, top 20, I suppose, in terms of the overall rankings. Would typically the ones, I suppose, that would be offered that sort of academic article role, within the university. But that's not to say that that's the only criteria.
Okay, so it's not just marks. They do consider other things, like if you're doing extramural activities.
That's it. So I think if you've got good experience in tutoring, that also plays a hand. So if you've been helping the university in undergrad and tutoring and mentoring, you might fall outside those marks, but you've had a good experience and the university already knows you in terms of the work and what you're giving back to the students. So that obviously also has something to do. But I think the main thing is obviously the better your marks, the better your chances are of getting into academic articles. In order to really understand something, I always say you need to be able to teach it. So I think that's obviously what the, you know, the different lecturers within the departments that I suppose are hiring you are looking to make sure that you can make that connection. Because now going from CTA, it was okay if you knew 60% of the work because you're going to pass CTA, but it's not okay now if you're lecturing valuations and you've got 10 people asking you complex questions.
Yes, that's
you can't say now, oh, sorry, I don't know that one. You know, I'll have to get back to you, because you're going to lose all credibility. So it's important to be able then to really understand the topic well enough that you can answer anything. And I mean, that's just that practical application of the theory. Yeah.
And was there an exam or like a test that you had to basically complete before you did academic articles? To almost like you said, if anybody could answer or ask you a question, you'd be able to answer. But was there like a test that prepared you for it?
So there wasn't a test, but there was an interview. And it was quite a... So basically all your lecturers from CTA and undergrad...
On a panel discussion.
A panel. And for like half an hour, 45 minutes, just fire questions at you and see how you think, see how you respond, see how you handle pressure. And then they make the decision. So I think, you know, I don't know the actual numbers, but I'd assume they probably, you know, seen maybe double the amount of people that eventually get hired. So maybe they're seeing about 30 candidates. And then in the end, at UJ at the time, I think there were roughly 15 academic trainees that eventually got hired. So everyone applies who wants the position. They obviously filter it down. The top candidates come in for that day, and then you get grilled from all the different academics. And then if you pass those checks, then they make you an offer. And I was one of those very fortunate candidates that was able to do that. And loved every minute.
Which module, which subject did you teach?
CTA finance. So,
and you know what?
Valuation.
I'm so glad we are doing this interview, because there are so many of my mentees that are struggling with manic, and I want you to tell us from an academic clerk point of view, what mistakes did you see, especially from your point of view, and how can our followers and mentees learn from it?
So I think the biggest mistake that I see with finance is students trying to memorize the steps and the principles. And it's just, you know, it's just never going to work. And the reason is that if, for example, you are memorizing activity-based costing and how you are allocating those fixed costs to the different activities, and you've got that memorized in your head, all that happens is the lecturer then just changes that question slightly and asks you to comment on the calculations that have been made or something like that. And then you're done. You know, then you're not going to do well in that question at all. And there are so many different ways for the lecturers to ask the questions, because it's finance, right? It's business. It's real world problems. So typically they're seeing something that's interesting. They're seeing everything, you know, that's interesting, that's happening in the news at the time, and then they're creating questions based on that. So there's so many different ways to adapt the theory to a question that you need to spend the time understanding the principles. And the best thing that I used to do, and I say it to when I lectured a bit for APT, is to try and put yourself, because finance, everything's practical, try and put yourself in the shoes of that business that the question is basing itself on, and try and really understand what's happening within that business before you answer anything. So if it's a valuation, understand first, close your eyes and just try and put yourself in the shoes of that business. What does that business do? How am I now going to address the specific questions that are being, you know, that are being asked?
I love that. I love that strategy. Yes.
Yeah, so that makes you just think about it a little bit, because remember, everything in the CA profession is based on real life and practical application. And the nice part about it is that with finance in the real world, there's so many different opinions and so much of it is subjective. But when you look at CTA, everything has an answer. There is a memo. So
as long as you can motivate it.
So everything is there for you to answer. They're giving you everything that you need in that scenario to put an answer down. It's not open-ended. So very important to also think about, from a finance point of view, what the lecturer is expecting you to say that's going to generate marks. I always used to see from these finance questions that I used to mark in the early days is that you would have these fantastic thoughts, but it's so out there. Whereas bring it back, because at the end of the day, a lecturer
Yes.
has to set a memo that they can then mark on in the same format for every student. So it's wonderful to have some out there ideas because you saw something on the news last night or you read an interesting article, but don't go and write 3 pages on it, because not everyone's going to be able to write on it. So always link it back to practical application of the theory, but with the memo in mind, because there must be marks given for your work. And then lastly, just on what I used to do, which really helped me, is that at the end of each module, whether it's finance, whether it's cost accounting, at the end of each module when you are finished, take a page out, and if you can write a 1-pager of all the principles and key elements of that specific topic module, and you get to the end of it knowing that you've covered everything that matters in that module and topic, then you're ready to move on to the next. But if you get halfway through, forgotten most of the principles, you're not going to miraculously remember them next week in your CPA exam. But if you can pull that piece of paper out in the middle of the night and write down all the key aspects to activity-based costing, to direct consortium costing, to capital budgeting, and you can just say, right, half a page, 3/4 of a page, these are the most important aspects in terms of allocating fixed costs. This is what I'm looking at. Then you are ready to move on to the next module. But don't go and do 2 familiar questions that you've seen in the question bank and think, okay, I've got 100% for these questions. I know this module perfectly.
And then they ask it a different way. But just when you're explaining, I'm guilty of it myself, and I had to learn from it as well. Writing 3 pages, thinking you're going to get the marks. What exam techniques can you give our followers and our mentees that they can also learn? Stick to the time, stick to what you know. Give us some tips, please.
So I think in sort of undergrad CTA, time is something that's a huge consideration. And I think that, sometimes you can spend a lot of time working on the wrong thing. So very important to know that you need to get more than 50% in all 4 subjects. So you can't go and absolutely smash auditing if 70 marks is auditing, but 30 marks is tax. And tax is something that you naturally struggle with and is one of your lower marks. Make sure, when you are writing those CTA papers, and it's a while ago now for me to remember back to CTA and the way I used to do it. But I think for me, eventually when I got to my September, October examinations, timing was something that I was tracking very carefully. Even if I knew that question perfectly and I was doing evaluation, and I got 85% through the valuation, and I know I'm going to get the rest of that valuation right, but I ran out of time. I'd rather move on to my next subject so that I don't jeopardize it. I wouldn't sacrifice accounting to get a higher mark in finance. I back myself that the 85% of the valuation that I've done, for example, is good enough to get me the marks to get through that for sure, but I need to now move on to accounting. If I'm able to do that accounting at a good pace, I then might have time to come back and finish. But I'm not going to jeopardize my accounting now to move into my next paper to say, well, I now need to get 90% for my next accounting question because I only got 10% of the way through. So for me, it was almost like you need to develop a strategy to answering your CTA papers and your undergrad papers in making sure that when the papers are combined, that you're giving each subject enough time based on the time allocated per mark.
Oh, but how did you get discipline to move on? Because sometimes your mind is so fixated on this question and you know that you can get 100%. Was it immediate discipline, or did you have to practice it over time to literally stop your favorite subject and move on to tax and move on to accounting?
Yeah, so I think for me it was something that I had to develop. So it was all in my exam technique. So at the beginning, for me, CTA was a big change because even in my conversion year, a lot of the subject tests were individual subjects one by one. So you would go in, you would write tax, you would finish tax. The next day you would write accounting. Then CTA came for me, and now you've got all 4 disciplines. So it's a big shock and a big change. And to your point, finance for me, strongest subject, love the subject. I could spend, days on answering and unpacking it. And that's unfortunately what happened at the start of my, you do your CE test, that sort of test where you ask, and all 4 are now muddled together. And it's difficult to disconnect, I suppose, from all the different subjects initially. And to your point, I think very difficult to just stop something halfway through, especially if you've got a little bit of OCD like I've got, where you want to see something through, complete the task before moving on. But at the end of the day, it jeopardizes your overall CTA mark. So I got to a point where if I'm now comfortable, I've answered, but I'm only 90% through, I need to be confident I've done very well in that 90%.
Yes.
And even if I get 70% for the question, that is fantastic. It's going to do really well for me in my overall mark. But now I'm not done. I need to go and I need to do my accounting and I need to do my auditing. And I think that was also something where you're writing 100-page, a 100-mark question, and you now smash the 70-mark of finance question. You take longer than you should, and you now get complacent when answering the tax, auditing, or accounting 30-marker. And that just puts huge pressure on you going forward, and ultimately could result in you writing a supplementary. And for me, that was something I never ever wanted to deal with. Studying once for that was going to be enough.
I'm glad that you were never fortunate to write us up.
And that frightened the living daylights out of me, having to then come back and restudy everything again. So for me, I got to a point mid-year where I was comfortable in tracking my time. And if I got to the end of my time, I moved on to the next subject discipline to make sure that I nailed that subject then as well. And if I worked quickly, I could always come back then and finish up. And a lot of the time I wasn't able to do that but I didn't want to ever be in a position where now you've underestimated the auditing, the accounting question. It's going to take you longer than you thought it was going to, and now you put yourself under huge pressure going forward. And it's just, at the end of the day, you don't need to get 100% to pass CTA, and that's what you need to keep in mind. It's a strategy to pass every single subject and getting more than 50% for every single subject at the end of the 3 days, not getting 100% on session 1 for one subject alone.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Nick, thank you so much. To end off this episode, I want to know what motivates you and what keeps you motivated to do what you do. And I know you're busy with the Invigilator app. You're doing big things. And I'm so thankful that you have just taken your time out to be with us. So tell us what motivates you and what keeps you motivated every single day.
So I think for me, I've got 2 big motivations with the Invigilator app. So I mean, and I've had this question a lot of times where people ask, are you doing everything in your career that you wanted to do? And I wake up every morning, and I am so fortunate because I love everything about what I do on a daily basis.
You are really blessed.
Absolutely, and it's my passion for education. It's my passion for business. It's my passion for tech. And it's my passion for family, because obviously, as you know, my brother is one of the other co-founders and the senior developer, in terms of building all our tech, from the ground up. So I get to have all of those elements in my working day. So for me, that waking up every morning, and sure, you have your tough days where you've got those long hours or your tech's not working properly. And I mean, with technology, you never have everything working the way you want to. So it's always continuous progress. But, my belief is always, failure is only when you quit. If you don't quit, then it's a lesson and you can better yourself. And that's really been sort of our story, that when we've had a hiccup, when we've had a hurdle, and we've had many, we've picked ourselves, dusted ourselves off, and it becomes the next challenge to say, how do we solve this? So for me, waking up, having all of those elements together, that for me is a huge passion. Being able to recognize how fortunate I am to be a chartered accountant, number 1, to have this amazing qualification. And then number 2, to have this fantastic opportunity and all these resources around me that I really just enjoy, being around, doing, and sort of driving me forward. Secondly, in terms of what we've been able to do with the Invigilator, the technology like the Invigilator app opens up education. So it makes education more accessible, because what we're seeing now is students studying throughout Africa at a university that they choose, but they don't necessarily have to travel to that university. So it means that, for example, if you're based in Kenya, but you want to study at the University of Johannesburg or the University of South Africa, you no longer have to move all the way here in order to do that. So accessibility of education, we're just opening up the borders for education. And then secondly, because of that, and because universities can accept more and more students now, it means that education is slowly going to become more affordable, because universities can start increasing revenue because there's more and more students now attending the universities. All of the fixed costs with regards to the venues they had to have in the past, printing all the papers, the logistics, all of that falls away. So you're getting more and more students the opportunity to then study. So what technology like the Invigilator app is doing is it's opening up accessibility of education, and then more importantly, affordability of education going forward. And that for me is a massive driver, because Africa has never really had tech that they've been able to adopt across a whole university or a whole school, because it's typically been built in the United States or the United Kingdom, and it doesn't necessarily understand our context. You know, throw a bit of load shedding into tech, none of those solutions know how to handle it. So we've got to build that here with our knowledge of what context and what hurdles do we have to overcome.
Yes.
So because of that now, it's my responsibility to make sure as many students in South Africa, in Africa, and then globally get to experience and enjoy the benefit of more effective teaching and learning through online tools like the Invigilator. And that drives me.
I love that, Nick. It really tickles my not tickles my heart, it pulls at my heartstrings, because I grew up in a background where, you know, I had to do very well to get a bursary, because it wasn't exactly easy for my parents to pay for studies. So your goal to make education so accessible, like, wow. Like, I'm going to give you a round of applause, because you are definitely changing the way people see things and see education. And sometimes people are scared of tech, but if we could get education in a way that is accessible to us, to increase our learning, to give us knowledge, to better ourselves, how is South Africa? I see a bright future for South Africa in the future with the Invigilator app. So thank you so much for being with us on the Mentorpiece. And I just wish you and your family many blessings along the road. And I can't wait to see the Invigilator app in every university that we can ever think of.
Thank you so much, Andrea. It's been lovely chatting to you. And yeah, really enjoyed it. And thank you so much for your kind words and blessings. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.